So good afternoon. Why does history matter? Well, because if you forget about the past, it tends to repeat itself. Our mission is to collect, preserve, and share the Japanese American history, culture, and arts with a vision to build bridges of human understanding through inspiration, innovation, and inclusion. Why does JAMsj matter today? We protect, advocate, and share the early immigration history, stories of discrimination, incarceration, and the Japanese American art and culture. We're also a part of the San Jose Japantown community and work together with other organizations and businesses to keep our Japantown thriving. As we look at the future of JAMsj and our vision, inspiration, the Kawakami House project is a part of the growing footprint, and it also provides us new opportunities to share more stories. We're also making the museum more accessible to everyone. We recently added a QR translator app that allows people to translate our signage into 15 different languages to both voice and text. And we want to become a destination worthy of repeat visits. As it relates to innovation, we now have a 360-degree virtual tour of the museum that is on our website, and this is made possible by a company called Matterport based in Santa Clara, California. The intent with this app is to allow visitors to virtually tour the museum anytime from anywhere in the world. And we've also partnered with RICO to develop a docent-led virtual tour. This has become very popular during the pandemic, especially for school groups who wanted to tour the museum but couldn't. And then last but not least, we also added an augmented reality tour of Japantown called Hidden Histories. And that's been active for a couple of years now. As it relates to inclusion, the Kawakami House project will allow us to restore this one-of-a-kind historic structure in Japantown. And we plan to use this space as a place for people to share stories, and not just with the Japanese, not for the Japanese Americans, but all Asian American communities as well. So the future is really now. We need the space as we continue to grow our collection. We also realize that the Japanese American community is aging, and we need to capture their stories now. The other point is the Kawakami House needs some tender loving care now. And in 2022, this marks our 35th anniversary, so the timing for us is perfect right now. What I'd like to do now is introduce Raymond Kawakami. He's going to introduce and share his family story with you. With that, Raymond, take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raymond Kawakami, and I am the grandson of Kohachi Kawakami. This story is about the building at the 529 North 5th Street and a family that lived there for many years. The house is currently under the stewardship of the Japanese American Museum of San Jose and is now known as the Kawakami House. The information presented here is a product of recollections and interviews of my Aunt Elsie, my father George, two children of Kohachi and his wife Fuji. We believe that the house was constructed in 1870, making it one of the oldest homes in the area that eventually became known as Japantown. This photo of the house was taken by my cousin Patty Miyagi and shows what it looked like in 1980. In 1905, Kohachi and Fuji came to San Francisco by way of Hawaii. They had met each other there and married some years earlier. The family photo was taken circa 1912, and in the background from left to right is son Masao, Kohachi, daughter Mitsui, and Fuji. The foreground shows a young Elsie, who was the last Kawakami to inhabit the house over 80 years later. In 1913, the California alien land laws prevented non-citizens from owning property. So in order for the house to be bought by Issei, known as the first generation Japanese in the US, Kohachi put the house in my father's name in 1919 when he was just 1 year old. By 1924, there were 7 children in the Kawakami family. Son Masao had returned to Japan, but unfortunately passed away at the age of 10. Mitsui, a Nisei, or the first generation to be born in the US, had an accident at a very young age and died when she was 6. Those 7 children in 1924 were born between 1910 and 1923, and they were, in order, Elsie, Emily, Earl, Clara, Bertha, George, and Eddie. Kohachi worked as a tenant farmer and had leased some land out on Gish Road in San Jose. He sold his crops to a local wholesaler. During the Great Depression, Kohachi continued to work the farm but soon realized that his children showed no interest in continuing the farming life. Kohachi then worked odd jobs, one that included fruit picking, and also maintained the family vegetable garden at the house on 5th Street. In 1942, as a result of the Executive Order 9066, signed into law by President Franklin Roosevelt, the family was effectively broken up. Eddie, Earl, and Emily traveled to Denver at the encouragement of the government's dictate that Japanese Americans move away from the Pacific Coast to the interior of the country. Clara was already in New York with her husband, and Bertha was too ill to travel, so she remained in a local hospital. That left my father George, his sister Elsie, and their parents Kohachi and Fuji to be evacuated to the Santa Anita racetrack in Southern California in late May 1942. The house on 5th Street was left in the hands of a trusted lawyer. Several months later, the family was moved to Heart Mountain, Wyoming. While the family was at Heart Mountain, Earl joined them, and Eddie, the youngest son, who was 19 or 20 at the time, enlisted in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which ended up being the most highly decorated in U.S. military history. My father, somewhere around 1943, left Heart Mountain after taking an oath of loyalty to the U.S. and moved to Chicago to find work. There, he was eventually employed in the production of the Norden bomb sight. After the war, some of the family returned to San Jose and the house on 5th Street. However, there was already a family living there, and they would not move out until the lease was up. So Kohachi, Fuji, and Elsie found a room at a boarding house down the street at 639 North 5th, the Civic Unity Hostel. Several months later, Kohachi moved his family back into the 529 North 5th house, and some repairs and cleaning was needed before the house was their home again. While many Japanese families lost everything as a result of being incarcerated, Kohachi's family was a rare example of one that was able to return to their property after being forcibly removed. While retired, Kohachi still tended his vegetable garden. However, a couple of years later, in 1947, Fuji passes away. It is sad to think that she did not live long enough to see her husband finally get his naturalization certificate in 1954. Kohachi became a U.S. citizen and earned the right to own property, something that was denied to him decades earlier. 5 years later, in 1959, my grandfather, Kohachi Kawakami, passes, having been in the house for almost 40 years and bringing an end to the first generation of Kawakamis who lived there. From then on, my Aunt Elsie lived in the house with her husband, George and Noe. Our extended family that was here in the Bay Area, Emily, Earl, and my father, George, would gather their own families and spend New Year's Eve at the San Jose house with food, talk, and the eventual poker game lasting into the early hours of the morning. In 1977, the city of San Jose awarded the house the status as an identified structure, important because it was one of the first homes owned by a Japanese American family. Then, in 1995, my Aunt Elsie passes away. Once again, ownership of the house was placed in my father's hands, and he sold it around 1999 to a private party. In 2005, the house was transferred to the Japanese American Museum of San Jose, which brings us up to date. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of history about this building and providing some background on the immigrant Japanese family that once called this place home.
Hi, I'm Aaron Ushiro. I am a Japanese American Museum of San Jose board member. I've been involved in this project from the very beginning. I'm an architect by trade, and I've been asked to lead this project from the inception all the way to construction. So wanted to give you a snapshot of where we are today and the history behind this project. In 2020, the board approved unanimously to restore the Kawakami House and bring it back to its original estate. In 2021, we held numerous design sessions to determine what the house should be used for and what functions that shall it serve. As Michael said before, we want this to be a community space for all immigrant families and Asian American communities. And here we are today in 2022. We started our capital campaign to start funding to fundraise for this historic project. And today we have raised over $469,000. Here's our milestone schedule. So we started fundraising in March of 2021, and we will continue to do that until March of 2023 and maybe forward. We have a $2.5 million target. And this includes design costs, construction costs, and exhibit costs. So it's an all-in figure to make this reality. And I said before, $469,000 has been raised, but we're about 2.1 million short of our estimated goal. We hope this fundraising takes about 2 years, as I stated in the first step here. However, in spite of time, we wanted to get going and not wait for the full $2.5 million target, and we wanted to start architectural design. So this is the rehabilitation design, and we are here. We have signed the Architectural and Engineering Design Services proposal with MBA Architects as of July of this year. And we have started to do some preliminary layouts and going through some programmatic goals. Starting next year in January 2023, we hope to have a majority of the design completed, and we hope that we have raised enough funding to start the permitting process. And we anticipate that to take about 4 months. So that'll take us to the spring of 2023. And what we hope is by May of 2023, we will have raised the $2.5 million milestone. And that way we can start our bidding and contract execution process, as well as the actual building rehabilitation. And with that, that is our schedule, and I'd like to hand it back to Michael.
Aaron and Raymond, thank you very much for your presentations. As Raymond shared his family story, it reminds us all of the hardships and struggles the Japanese Americans experience. Because of this, the Kawakami House is not only one of the first homes in the nation owned by a JA, but it's also a symbol of their resilience. If you'd like to help support the Kawakami House restoration project, please scan the QR code now showing on your screen. Every dollar helps, and we appreciate your support. Let's learn from the past and make sure we create a better future.